I haven't seen you since you were speaking at one of my events, I guess almost 3 years ago now.
Yes.
And you were CEO of Park. And we want to talk a little bit about Park, but you are now the CTO of HP. You also run HP Labs. So just maybe give us a little day in the life of what it's like to be doing that job.
Happy to do that. But before I get into the answer to the question, I must say this feels amazing. You know, the real stage, real moderator, and the real audience. So it's been a while since we had that.
It feels good.
Those things coming together. So it certainly feels energizing and amazing. Yeah, the role, basically, I am the Chief Technology Officer at HP Inc. And I have kind of two responsibilities. One is our overall technology strategy across the company. And I'm also leading up our centralized R&D function, which basically oversees the more longer-term hyper-growth innovation investments that we have across the board.
That's great. And you know, before we jump into everything you're doing at HP, first of all, if you haven't been on the tour at what we used to call Xerox Park or Park, take the tour. You were gracious enough to host us for a reception the last time we did an event, and it's fantastic. Before we get into the HP, you know, what's kind of in arguably one of the most famous innovation labs in Silicon Valley, what was kind of bubbling up and what was being worked on from a sustainability and sort of climate change perspective at Park before you left?
Yeah, happy to answer that.
Well, whatever you can answer. I know there's a lot of secrecy
so I need
there
I need to be careful there a little bit. But also, it's been 2+ years almost since I left. But one of the 5 innovation focus areas at Park at the time I left was in clean tech, among others. And there was a significant amount of investment working with a number of Fortune 500 companies, a lot with the U.S. government, ARPA-E in particular, to bring clean tech innovation to the market. Park's business model really focuses on early stage innovation, more than more applied in engineering and product development, if you will. So there were technologies in next generation HVAC systems. There were technologies in next generation battery systems. Both on the physical side, cyber side, and the hardware side. On battery health management systems, sensors, AI algorithms as it comes into management of cyber physical devices. So a whole host of technologies.
That's great. That's great. In terms of HP, Bill Hewlett and David Packard were always sort of forward thinking. All stakeholders and that trend, which seems to be very popular now, they were really always out there. The Planet Partners, which recycles the cartridges, the ink cartridges, over 1 billion ink cartridges now have been recycled. Just talk to me a little bit about as you went over there and the history of HP and its commitment to, sustainability and fighting climate change and things like that.
Yeah, I think we've been a fairly vocal company around our commitment to ESG and sustainability and climate change. I think you identified it very correctly. I think in a lot of ways it goes all the way back to the founders, Bill and Dave, and their ambition to create a purpose-driven company that is
and before it was popular to be
exactly not only developing technology for the community, but also serving all different kinds of needs of the key stakeholders as well as its community. So that has been sort of ingrained in the DNA and the culture that we have, which was actually one of the things, the values of the company, the culture of the company, the brand name was very attractive for me to actually make the switch to HP as well. And that continues today, that commitment, that strong set of values and purpose-driven enterprise concept is really a big part of who we are. With that, what comes is transparency. Speaking of being, way before, your competition and your peers, et cetera, we have been reporting on our progress in sustainability and our sustainability goals, et cetera, for the last 20 years, way before it became a more well-accepted industry practice, if you will.
And so by 2025, the goals for the company, operational carbon neutrality and renewable electricity. By 2030, supply chain carbon neutrality. I want to talk a little bit about that. 75% product packaging circularity, 0 deforestation for paper products, which is obviously a huge thing with paper and printers and things like that. And by 2040, total net zero across the HP value chain.
Yeah.
So what I was excited about having you here is to get the CTO's perspective, because I think the CTO and the CIO, even though there are sometimes combined roles, the CTO is a little bit more about technology, sort of road mapping and strategy versus sort of keeping the IT trains running on time. How do you incorporate that from sort of a product development standpoint and technology road mapping from a product development standpoint with sustainability in mind? Like, how do you think about that as the CTO of a huge global company?
Yeah, I think it all starts with a strong commitment at the top level. Obviously, our board, our CEO, our entire executive leadership team is fully committed to our sustainability goals. I think 2021 was, in a lot of ways, a fairly pivotal year when it comes to that. If you think about U.S. joining back in the Paris Climate Agreement, we had the COP26 in Glasgow at the end of the year. So there was a good momentum in terms of elevated level of awareness around sustainability. And we believe that we all share responsibility to really build the right safeguards for our planet and really be committed to sustainability and create sustainable impact. So that sort of translates into our technology strategy as well. We view sustainability as a horizontal pillar that drives a lot of our innovation agenda and the roadmap, and you can see it across the board. In some areas, it's easier to see than others. If you're doing carbon capture, for example, that's pretty obvious. But I think, as technologists and technology leaders, if you think about how we can contribute to sustainability, I would argue that we'll find an angle if you think creatively and deep enough about how to incorporate that. So it comes to life in many different ways. Obviously, deforestation and forest friendly print is one area. We have a lot of focus for our print business. We have a lot of focus on plastics, as you might imagine. We have done a lot of sourcing decisions with respect to ocean-bound plastics. I think we've launched 300 plus products in that space. Our first laptop lineup, HP Elite Dragonfly, is actually 100% made out of ocean-bound plastics. So we're very proud of some of those. And then, sustainable packaging is another area. So those are kind of in our core markets. But as we think about the future and some of the future innovation areas, sustainability continues to be a priority. We want to basically eliminate single-use plastics from the packaging. We have been investing in that area, bringing some of our 3D printing capabilities into the mix in enabling next generation molded fiber of full paper-based packaging production and things of that nature. So we're very excited about some of these things as well.
Did you bring sort of a methodology in terms of your experience at Park, and of course your broader corporate history and experience, where you're at a place where everybody's there to innovate, everyone's there trying to change something, dramatically, in terms of road mapping now for like a large corporation, in terms of, just think about the plastics, just think about the ink, just think about the paper products and deforestation. How do you incorporate that and achieve those goals and do that road mapping from a strategic standpoint? How do you actually execute that internally? Do you kind of take that open innovation model from Park and try to apply that in this large corporation, or do you set up little SWAT teams internally to do it?
A little bit of all of those.
Yeah.
I think there's a set of best practices, if you will, that you can take advantage of when it comes to roadmap building, strategy building. One of the things that's really important, which is the crux of open innovation. Innovation at the end of the day is an ecosystem play, right? So you have to be pretty well connected to the rest of the key stakeholders in the ecosystem, whether that's academia, industrial research labs, the startup community, the VC community, investors, all the above, if you will. So that was one of the things I accelerated that at HP in terms of our level of connectedness to the rest of the innovation ecosystem. And with that comes really a better understanding and listening ability of what are the emerging trends, where is the technology going, where is the science going, what are some of the constraints, what are some of the business dynamics, market dynamics, and things of that nature. So you can incorporate all of those and synthesize into your roadmap and strategy building. So that was one of the things. And we work with other companies as well. We have shared goals and mutual interest in taking care of the planet. And as we develop new technology, and as we develop, one example is, for example, we're looking at metrics and KPIs that are driven from first principles that looks at sustainability cradle to cradle and in a much more holistic way to look at total energy use footprint of a product from inception to product development to manufacturing, transportation, in use, end of life, et cetera. and how do you measure that entire footprint in a meaningful way? We work with other companies. We work with our partners and suppliers to push on some of the goals that we have so that we create this not only for the products that we develop, but also across the entire value chain that we have. The other thing that I would mention is maybe this is sort of an interesting example of open innovation spirit, but applied internally. This year, for the first time, for 50,000 plus employees, we encourage everybody to actually have an individual sustainable impact goal. So I inspect that quite carefully in my team as well, making sure all the technology leaders, innovators, creators, put the sustainability lens as we think about next generation innovation.
That's great. So I want to be sure we get to a question or two. If anybody has a question for Tolga right here, and we'll wait for the mic to show up.
Sure.
And if you could identify yourself as well. Thanks.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Teja Jalangada. I'm a solar design engineer at Cupertino Electric, and I'm very interested in cradle-to-cradle design, and I'm glad that HP is a leader in this. And you mentioned some of the packaging types that are being used. I don't know if one of the partners is Ecovative, where they're using mushroom-based packaging systems. And I wonder what other research that HP is doing in its packaging designs, and other cradle-to-cradle manufacturing techniques.
Yeah, so happy to follow up with you on the overall framework that we're developing. But specifically about the packaging, there's a couple of things, right? So one is how do we get more smarter and creative about our own packaging solutions when it comes to our product lineup, and reduce the overall carbon footprint there. That's one. The other one that I was mentioning is essentially enabling at scale production of molded fiber paper-based products, essentially, that are eco-friendly, using some of our 3D investments in a 3D platform. And that, think about molded fiber-based, bottles and other kinds of packaging solutions that are biodegradable completely 100%, right? So that, I think that's going to have a lot of impact, and that's one of the areas that we're looking into also.
Any other questions out here? One more here.
Hi, this is Jiyoung Choi from ValueNext. We are a data visualization company trying to help our clients to identify R&D roadmap and innovation strategy. So I'm just wondering, as a CTO of HP, what kind of best practice do you recommend to some other big companies trying to create those roadmaps and trying to predict the future?
Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about that, right? So a big part of it is being connected to the rest of the innovation ecosystem, and also being in the listening mode. That's super important in terms of really building, but understanding emerging trends, emerging technology trends, not sort of what's already out there, but what's coming through the technology maturation curves and things of that nature. We look at across the globe, for example, government agencies, and what are some of the technology innovation investment priorities when it comes to longer-term, high-risk, high-reward type of programs that are funded typically by the public sector as opposed to the private sector, trying to understand and extract some of the trends from there. Very well connected with the investor community in terms of understanding where private equity, VC funding, et cetera, are going. We have a network of academic partners across the globe. I actually just last week I came back from Singapore, where we have our largest academic partnership, and it all boils down to really kind of listening, absorbing all of those trends, and then synthesizing them into a short-term, mid-term, long-term technology roadmap and strategy.
Well, and I know we got to go because we're at time, and I know everyone's hungry. But listening to that, I thought about today. One of the themes is acceleration. We know the problem, and now we got to accelerate. Solving these problems. Going back to your history at Park and even managing your teams today, managing HP Labs and the teams at Park, what's your recommendation, or did you ever have to go to those teams and say, okay, what we're doing, we need to do it faster? Mm-hmm. How really at a tactical sort of day-to-day management level, do you have any advice for whether they're startups, VCs, large corporations? How do you accelerate it in terms of managing the teams that need to do the accelerating?
I would say act now. is probably the principle that drives that, right? So because a lot of people still, I believe, unfortunately, think that this is a concept of the future. It will eventually happen and whatnot, but it's happening. And there is a closing window of opportunity for us to really continue to act. I mean, the 50,000 plus employees and having sustainable impact goals is a great example of that, of leadership and management there. I think we need to continue emphasizing that we need to act now, and it's a shared responsibility that everybody needs to shoulder.
That's great. All right, it's time to eat. And David, do you want to come close us out, or?
No, just we're releasing you finally.
All right.
Thank you.